Good afternoon. It's been 2 weeks, so hopefully I remember how to get these meetings started. First of all, recognize a quorum. I am calling this meeting of the Cannabis Control Commission to order at 1:05 p.m. on July 26th, 2018. Can everybody in the back hear me? Great. Can I ask, is this meeting being recorded? Thank you. Let me put the public on notice this meeting is being recorded. Can I ask everybody to please put their cell phones on silent or shut them off altogether? Thank you. Since it has been 2 weeks since our last meeting, we have actually a pretty packed agenda, so I'm going to keep my comments brief and just describe what we're going to cover today in the agenda. We have one set of meeting minutes to review and approve. We have the standard executive director report. We have one new employee, if I'm correct, to introduce, and then we'll have our standard slides to update the status of license applications. We have, before we get into the review of staff recommendations on licenses, we have several commission discussions, some of which we'll vote on, some of which we'll just discuss. But we, as we have mentioned in the past, have, with the leadership of Commissioner McBride, been developing guidance with respect to host community agreements. There has been some confusion on both sides in terms of guidelines there, and so we have developed some guidance that Commissioner McBride, as I said, has taken the leadership on. We'll discuss that. We, in reviewing and discussing previous license applications, have given some pushback to some of the applicants about the specificity of their positive impact plan, and we agreed that we would give guidance on that. And with the leadership of Commissioner Title, we do have a document to review about guidance for positive impact plans. We also have, again, with the leadership of Commissioner Title, some guidance with respect to municipalities and equity issues, and so we'll talk about that. Commissioner Doyle has provided leadership on our agricultural issues, including that we have a mandated report to the legislature on farmers and businesses of all sizes, and so we're going to review that. We also, at the request of Commissioner Title, if you recall, in a previous meeting, there was a request by Commissioner Title to put the issue of economic empowerment applications on the table. We have a survey to the 300 plus people that applied for priority certification, economic empowerment priority certification, that we sent out on Friday. We have 60 plus responses from that survey. I was trained as a statistician, so it is my responsibility to say that we still need some more data before we can draw definitive conclusions, but we thought we'd at least share some high-level data from that as part of our conversation about economic empowerment applications. And in a subsequent meeting, hopefully we'll get a greater number of responses, and we'll have much more refined statistical analysis that we can perform on the issue. But it's an important issue that we wanted to get on the table, and we'll share at a high level the data that we've gotten back thus far. And we had talked before, the final discussion item for the commission is we've talked before about suitability committee, that a suitability review committee that would be required in those instances where our background checks came back with issues that required discussion and recommendation. And the executive director is going to make a recommendation, or a request, excuse me, that we delegate the responsibility for organizing that committee to, and we'll discuss and vote on that. That's it for the topics, although there's 7 topics there, so, or 6, excuse me, and each of them could take quite a while, so this might be a lengthy meeting. Once we're through that, we have 7 completed license applications that the staff has done their analysis on and review on, that we've gotten background check information completed, and we have heard back from the relevant community that their requirements have been met, and so the staff will make a recommendation on each of these 7 license applications. That's it. It's going to be a pretty packed meeting, so I said I'll keep my remarks short, and let's just get into the topics at hand. The first order of business being approval of minutes from previous meeting, July 12th, 2018. Can I ask if everyone on the commission has had a chance to review these minutes?
Yes.
Are there any comments or suggested edits? And can I have a motion to approve the minutes from July 12th?
So moved. Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. These minutes have been approved, and thanks to the team that has pulled together. That is the last meeting that we had, so I think we are completely caught up with respect to minutes. Thank you. Before we get into the license summary, Mr. Executive Director, can you give us your staffing report, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a few staffing updates I'd like to share with the Commission. First is the introduction of a new team member, that is Pauline Wynn. Pauline joins us as Associate General Counsel on General Counsel Christine Bailey's team. She comes to us most recently from the State Ethics Commission, where she was a Senior Assistant General Counsel and for a time served as the Acting General Counsel. Has previously worked at the Division of Professional Licensure in the Office of Legal Counsel as a contract attorney. She's a graduate of BC Law and Harvard University, and again joins the Commission as our new Associate General Counsel. We're very excited to have her, and already she's hit the ground running in the week or so that she's been here. So
I guess we're all out of practice, including yourself, but what's the lawyer versus non-lawyer count now?
We continue to sufficiently dominate the ranks. Also related to staffing.
Anything else on the staffing front?
We are actively interviewing for a number of positions, and as you know, we have previously posted our investigator position. We had many hundreds of applications for that role, and we are beginning the interview process for that, as well as for HR generalist. So many employment related items in the works and in various stages, but confident that in the next few meetings we'll have periodic updates on new hires as well as where we stand in that interview process.
Great, thank you. Anything else on the staffing front, or should we move into the licensing statistics?
We can move into the statistics. So this is the broader kind of totals capture of information from our licensing system, which is there are 2,089 applications in total. Those break down into 177 pending with at least one part of an application, one packet having been submitted. 107 have been withdrawn, 1,800 are incomplete, and of course the Commission has to date issued 5 provisional licenses. Those break down into the table that you see there, which is 2 craft cooperative, 3 independent testing lab, 1 laboratory agent, 42 cultivation, 36 establishment agent, 9 microbusiness, 26 product manufacturer, 3 research facility, 49 retail, 2 transportation with an existing establishment license, and finally 4 third-party transportation. That's the grand total of 177.
Thank you.
That item, those 177 break down into the next slide would be 85 total pending applications with all 4 packets having been submitted. Those break down into the following, which is 1 independent testing lab, 30 cultivation, 3 microbusiness, 20 product manufacturer, 3 research facility, 26 retail, and 2 transportation with an existing establishment license. And as you see on the right-hand side, the plus is the differentiation from the previous meeting. So that includes 1 additional independent testing lab, 5 cultivation. That's so again total being 12 new applications or 4 packets having been submitted since the last meeting. That's 57 R&D priorities, 3 empowerment, and 25 general applicants. Those 85 applications represent 45 separate entities.
Okay. Thank you.
So this slide was new as of our last meeting, and this is a continuation of that, which is, of those 85, where are they in our process? There are 35 that have been submitted and are awaiting staff review for first completeness. That includes, of course, those 12 applications that within the past 2 weeks have been, all 4 packets having been submitted. There are 18 that have been identified as having submitted insufficient information for us to review and therefore incomplete. There are 20 that are out for third party. That includes the municipal notice to the city or town in which the entity intends to be located, as well as a third party background check. There are 7 that are before you today for consideration that are, of course, waiting for your evaluation, and then, of course, the 5 that have been previously before the Commission for provisional license. And lastly is where those applications sit across Massachusetts based on a county breakdown. I think just for the Commission's edification here, there are 3 additional applications from Berkshire County, 6 from Worcester County, and 3 from Plymouth County that make up the the 12 that are
Right.
new as the last map, correct?
Any questions or comments from the commission? Thank you. The update.
That is all that I have at this time.
That's all you have for your report. Okay, so let's move into the discussion topics in front of the commission, and we'll start, if it's okay, with the post-community agreement guidance. So Commissioner McBride, again, my thanks to Commissioner McBride for her leadership in developing this for consideration by the commission.
So we're introducing the guidance on host community agreements, and my suggestion is we introduce this today and that then we consider putting it out for a short 2-week comment period so that members of the general public can weigh in on the sufficiency of the guidance and any feedback that they might want to provide. So the guidance on host community agreements was drafted to set the table for negotiations and to set bumpers for what might be included in a host community agreement. We are thankfully guided by ample decisional law, which is court cases, on the matter of fees, and we also have obviously the plain language of the statute, which is 94G, Section 3D. Happily, much of the case law is pretty recent in vintage, so we have some pretty good guideposts to help us. Now, generally speaking, when we talk about money that falls under the Chapter 55 of the Acts of 2017, we are really talking about 2 categories of money when we talk about the relationship between marijuana establishments and municipalities, and that's tax money and community impact fees. Now, everyone on the commission and a lot of people in the audience are very familiar with the fact that the tax money is limited insofar as there's a ceiling that the legislature set for assessments on marijuana products, and therefore establishments. 6.25% sales tax, a 10.75% excise tax, and an optional up to 3% local tax on retail sales only. So what about the other category of money, the community impact fees? The community impact fee authorized by Chapter 94G, Section 3D is optional and separate and apart from the taxes. Nevertheless, the tax limitations provide context and are a useful starting point for how we talked about the community impact fee. Simply put, if some amount of money is not a fee, it may be viewed as a tax. If it is a tax and is not authorized by the legislature, it may be viewed as impermissible. So, what is the community impact fee and what is permissible? The court cases inform us generally about what is a fee and that is really where we need to start, because at bottom, a community impact fee is just that, it's a fee. There's no new ground here. We are unique insofar as our subject matter, but not unique insofar as being guided by the decisional law on fees. It's worth noting that the fee concept is well trod in administrative law and in the municipal law context. And as I said before, the decisional law on the matter of fees is ample. And it's with that in mind that we can outline some basics about fees generally. Fees are charged in exchange for a particular government service which benefits the paying party, and it has to be sufficiently special and specific to that party as opposed to the general public. Fees are voluntary. That doesn't mean that you can choose not to pay the fee and still get the benefit.
So what does voluntary mean?
It means that you can choose to forego both the payment and the benefit and be on your way, unlike taxes, which we all know are certain, as is death. The fee is collected to compensate for the costs of providing the benefit. It is not intended to be a revenue generator. So it's with that in mind that we look at the plain language of the statute, Section 3D of Chapter 94G, to discern what is permissible in a community impact fee specifically. Now, we don't have specific elements within the statute of what can be included in the fee, but we do have a directive that the community impact fee is 1, optional, not mandatory. 2, it's reasonably related to the costs imposed upon the municipality by the operation of the marijuana establishment. 3, it's capped at 3% of gross annual sales, which of course means that it can be less than 3%. And 4, that it is strictly time limited to a term of no more than 5 years, which of course means that it can also be in place for fewer than 5 years. The guidance addresses each of these in turn. So what does it mean to be reasonably related? So the guidance that we are going to issue, if agreed upon by the commission, states that the commission views fees that are reasonably related as those that compensate the municipality for its actual and anticipated expenses resulting from the operation of the marijuana establishment. Case law tells us that costs associated with planning are okay. However, it is important that municipalities identify the plan specifics to justify the fee. There needs to be a reasonable relation. The fee cannot merely be a fee without designation of its origins or justification of its amount. Finally, the fee charge needs to be proportional to the cost or impact claimed by the community, and again, decisional law tells us that. 2, the cap of 3% on the community impact fee is a strict limit. Any fee that is more than 3% is not a community impact fee. If there is an additional agreement and there's an additional payment, it would be wise for those payments to comply with the legal requirements for fees that are set forth in case law, spelled out previously. And 3, finally, the community impact fee is limited to 5 years. It can be less than 5 years, but by statute, it can't be more. Now, this, of course, means that if you look at it and perhaps there is a negotiation that is ongoing where it may be difficult to discern what the specific costs are that need to be justified, perhaps it may make sense for the parties negotiating on that fee to consider a fee that's shorter than 5 years. And under the statute, the information justifying those fees is public record, and also in accordance with our regulations, upon renewal, there is a request that the costs associated with the host community agreement be submitted by the marijuana establishment as part of the renewal. So there may be an opportunity there for there to be a further discussion and talk about the community impact fee and what parts of the community impact fee may remain intact and what might want to be renegotiated. So that is the overview of the host community guidance that was drafted that I put before the commission for consideration today. I'm happy to take any questions and would welcome a discussion about the content of the host community agreement, which goes into greater detail in writing.
First of all, thank you again, Commissioner McBride, for your leadership on this important issue. I would like to have a discussion on this to the extent that there are comments or questions from the other commissioners. And we can talk about Commissioner McBride's suggestion to postpone voting on this for 2 weeks, pending input and comments from others. Any comments from the commissioner? Questions? Commissioner McBride? And Commissioner Doyle, I'm not surprised to see you raise your hand.
It's actually not a comment to Commissioner McBride, except again to express my thanks and admiration that you tackled this subject and did it so well. It is actually more an encouragement for folks on all sides of this issue to take the time that you are given to comment, and particularly the lawyers listening in the room. I really want to hear, because we hear a lot anecdotally, but I want to actually see an argument, legal argument, including statutory construction on both sides of this issue. Rather than, just hearing about it and hearing complaints about it, I would like to see both sides of this issue break down in essentially legal briefs, Supreme Judicial Court worthy legal briefs. Our general counsel just came from the Supreme Judicial Court, so we've got a high standard to meet here. But I think it is important that we get this out and get it resolved as soon as possible. So I really appreciate Commissioner McBride taking that first step, and I invite everybody to participate in this process.
That's it?
That's it.
Other comments or questions?
Go ahead, Commissioner Doyle.
I fully support everything in this guidance, and I want to thank you, Commissioner McBride, for your hard work on it. I hope that municipalities will find it helpful. I think that even though there's 2 local guidance documents being discussed today, and the other one is specifically marked equity, this one also specifically goes to the heart of equity, because before our commission can even look at any application, it has to have local approval. And every applicant must have a host community agreement in place. And so, therefore, the ability of small businesses, local businesses, women, veteran, farmer-owned businesses, econ empowerment, equity applicants, the ability for all of them to fairly negotiate a community host agreement that reflects the municipality's actual expenses or reasonably related expenses as laid out in the law is the critical factor, maybe even the most critical factor to creating a just and inclusive industry. And so if municipalities don't follow that law, they're creating an obstacle to the Commission's mission statement, which is to safely, equitably, and effectively implement the law. And we already know that barriers to entry, when they're too high at the local level, we end up with a market that is very slow to start up and that has a striking lack of diversity. And so the legislature wisely looked at that concern and balanced it against the concern that we don't want municipalities to bear any kind of cost or burden from these businesses. We want the communities that welcome these facilities to benefit from the tax revenue, to have their costs covered, to be able to accept voluntary donations. But keeping in mind that the ability of small entrepreneurs to access this market is also a priority, they put a strict cap on those fees. That strict cap is 3%. Period. So I hope that this guidance is helpful for those who have questions about that. Lastly, I just wanted to flag one part of the guidance, and it's not an edit, it's just a flag. On section 1, under community impact fee, what are examples of required conditions?
Yep. Going.
There is a list, what is permissible as part of a community impact fee? There's a list of some anticipated costs that may reasonably be included. And so the first fee, traffic intersection design studies where additional heavy traffic is anticipated, environmental impact studies anticipated as a result of cultivation, and public safety personnel overtime costs during time where higher congestions or crowds are anticipated, I see as actual costs that are expected due to the presence of the establishment. The fourth one, additional substance abuse prevention programming during the first years of operation, is what I would see as a voluntary donation. And that term voluntary donation has come up a lot. I think this is a very good example where a business might say, in addition to the costs that our business will bring to a municipality, we also want to contribute to substance abuse prevention programming. But that would still be included in the fee of up to 3%. No, my comment.
I just I want to thank Commissioner McBride for the work that she done on this. I know that this has been a very contentious issue throughout the Commonwealth. Commissioners have been in many cities and towns and have heard from the municipalities. One, they lack a lot of education surrounding this issue. We have to remember where this came from. It was a ballot initiative that turned into a law, which turned into where we are today. And so in a lot of that time, I'm not too sure how many of the municipal officials were actually following the path. Having said that, and I appreciate the comments of Commissioner Title, I do want to just add that last bullet point, additional substance use prevention programming during the first years of operation. From a public health perspective, a lot of these cities and towns are creating substance abuse prevention task force in their towns. And that when we are introducing a substance, we like to talk about alcohol and say how alcohol is a substance. Well, marijuana is a substance as well. And so additional funding to already established task force and prevention programming, I can see as an anticipated cost because clearly we need a lot of prevention and we need education. I've heard from across the state that our public safety personnel are being called because people don't know how to utilize the substance. They're overutilizing the substance. There's concerns that, something bad is happening to them. They call 911, ambulances come, and people tend to get attention that way. So I really think that the substance abuse prevention programming can be added to the list. I understand that for some people it's optional, but I really think that as this starts to progress, and these facilities start to open, we need to start to talk more about public health and the public health aspect of this, because the reality is, and we see it with alcohol all the time, when you introduce a substance to cities and towns, And sometimes in those equitable areas, and you have people of lower income and you have people that have been disproportionately affected, this does have an effect. And so instead of hiding our heads in the sand and pretending it doesn't exist, I really think that part of the conversation with municipalities needs to be some of the public health aspects of this, just as public safety with intersections and the attention of the public safety personnel. So just as an added thought.
I agree. I'm sorry, would you like to?
I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm willing to wait my turn patiently.
I actually just have one more piece to
Please.
add. So we're issuing this guidance, as has been pointed out by several commissioners, in the context of there being questions about what the content of host community agreements should be. It's on the heels of anecdotal evidence that there may be some concerns about how a select group of certain municipalities are acting, but it's also in the absence of a lot of information about how many municipalities are approaching host community agreements and generally the regulation and the integration of cannabis commerce into the fabric of their communities. And so it's with that in mind that I also just want to point out that another component of this is gathering that information. It's gathering the information in regard to response to the actual guidance, but also it's about gathering information from municipalities generally. With that in mind, and with the good work of Commissioner Doyle and David Lakeman, our Director of Government Affairs, a survey went out to municipalities earlier this week, I think on Monday. That is seeking to collect just that information and to collect examples of host community agreements that they have entered into or are negotiating, as well as a host of other information generally about the fabric of how this fits into the community, the fabric of the community. So I just want to highlight that also, that I do believe, even as we issue this guidance and start to seek the feedback, that this is a work in progress and needs to be a work in progress.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you mentioning the survey, and also not just Commissioner Doyle, but also our Director of Government Affairs, David Lakeman. Thank you for your role in the survey. And I'm sure I'm not thanking other people that should be thanked, but I totally support getting more information on this because there is a lot of anecdotal data, but we don't have a lot of facts. And I know that the survey, aside from asking a lot of questions, is also asking, if I'm correct, Commissioner Doyle, voluntarily for the respondents to send us a copy of executed host community agreements, which I think is imperative that we have the opportunity to view that. I'd like to pick up on that though and ask the commission or the commissioners to consider what, if we have the ability to collect these agreements either voluntarily or subsequently if we decide to modify our regulations to require the submission of HCAs, and I'm not suggesting we debate that right now, but my question is, what do we do with these host community agreements? What review should we do? What enforcement, if any, rights do we have? I think collecting data is great. I'm totally in support of it, but I recall a conversation that we had at the commission back in December about what role, if any, we should play in respect to enforcing these host community agreements. And I think based upon just the anecdotal evidence that we've got to date, that it's worth having that discussion again. And I'd just be interested in the thoughts of the other commissioners. And again, I support the idea of coming back and revisiting this in 2 weeks, but I'd like to get some thoughts about what, if any, enforcement authority we might have on this.
Mr. Chairman, I think the first question that I have, being one of the non-lawyers on the commission.
Well, that's why I was asking the question, so go ahead.
I can get you therapy if you need it, Mr. Chairman.
What do you think, do what?
Is as a I plead the fifth. As a regulatory body, what role, what legal avenue do we have? I mean, and I think that's something for the attorneys to answer. I don't know if our general counsel wants to take a chance at that, but I think first and foremost, there's been a lot of anecdotal things said to me that, well, you as a commission can enforce this, or you can tell them to go back and change this and renegotiate. For me, it's a legal question. What are we legally allowed to do? Because I think we need to set realistic expectations and not have people think that we can just change things on a whim. We're not the legislature. We can't just
No
change
longer.
chapter 55, no longer. Thank God this weekend. But I think we have to really be truthful and honest with people, and not give any false hope as to what we can physically do here at the commission.
I agree with that comment. I don't know that we want a definitive answer, but I do think it's something that what I was looking for is the commission's willingness to explore this issue over the next couple of weeks as we come back to review this document and make final vote on it, to have a more informed opinion about what, if any, legal obligations we have. But I'm happy to sustain a conversation. That's why I raised the topic. Commissioner Title?
My suggestion would be, I like Commissioner McBride's idea of having a short public comment
Yes.
period. I think we should expand that to the entire issue of local control in general, and then revisit the discussion.
Okay. I think that's a much more articulate way of saying what I was trying to say, so I agree with you.
Are there other suggestions? Is that
My,
work for
well,
you?
my one question is, what do you mean expand, Commissioner Title, about the entire issue of local control? Because I think one of the big pieces is the community host agreement. And then, I mean, I've heard lots of people comment on zoning process, but that's 351 cities and
Yeah.
towns have their zoning process.
I would suggest as a starting point the host community agreement, and then not to skip ahead, but the local equity guidance, and then the letter from the legislators about, well, I have it in front of me. It is our interpretation and intent that the CCC has the
This is the letter
authority
from,
and is
so
required.
everybody knows what we're talking about. This is a letter from Kuzak and Jalen. to the
This is a
commission.
letter from Senator Jalen and Representative Cusack, and it says, it is our interpretation and intent that the CCC has the authority and is required to therefore review any such community host agreements to ensure their compliance with the statute. So I think that, that issue, and then the two areas of guidance.
Sure, it's kind of being what Commissioner McBride just reviewed with respect to host community agreement.
And then what will the fifth agenda item here, the economic empowerment capital, or it should be the third agenda item, the equity focused municipal guidance that we'll discuss shortly.
That would be the extent of the conversation. So not zoning and other issues of local control.
No, I appreciate that, and I think that we do want public comment on some of these guidances that we've had. I guess my concern is that getting comments on what legislative intent was, again, will be anecdotal, because legislative intent came from the legislation that was released from the Committee on Marijuana Policy, which was subsequently debated, changed, and then signed into law. So, being a former legislator, intent changes during the debate. What comes out of committee,
and after the fact.
what comes out of committee is not what usually ends up on the governor's desk. And so, while I appreciate the comments and I welcome comments from the public at all times, I just wonder if that's going to be a good use of our time.
Let me be explicit. I suggest that we take the guidance document that Commissioner McBride just reviewed, the one that we're going to discuss, that Commissioner Title drove, discuss that. Certainly welcome input on any topics. Obviously consider the input of Senator Jalen and Representative Cusack, and get input from General Counsel, our General Counsel, to have that conversation. But I think totally consistent with what you were just saying. Clearly, we welcome comments on anything at any time, but in terms of our deliberation on the legal issues, I think the two basic points there are the opinion of General Counsel and the letter from the Senator and the Representative.
So then it'd be my hope that we take each one of these individually, so that we establish, and maybe the executive director can say that for us, that we initially establish that we're going to take a 2-week comment period on the host community agreement guidance, and then come back as a commission and revisit that. I don't know if that needs a vote or we can just establish it, but I think we should keep them separate, because people are going to get confused by
Right, so keep what's, I'm confused now about what you're suggesting, Commissioner Flanagan. Keep what's separate.
what our intention is of each one. I mean, you have 3 guidances up there.
Yeah, no, right now we're talking about the host community agreement guidance.
That's all we're talking about. And
I think what's on the table is to take 2 weeks, get public comment, reconvene to discuss host-community agreement guidance with the input we've gotten from the public, obviously, but the input we've gotten from the representative and the senator, input from our general counsel, and then obviously discussion of the commission. And so we're speaking specifically, and we'll have the same discussion for the other 4 issues, but for the host-community agreement guidance, specifically what I just articulated.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
And I may have misheard Commissioner Title. I thought she was also suggesting that we do that same 2-week comment period on the guidance on equitable policy.
She was, and as a matter of order, I was just saying, let's wait, we'll come back and discuss that.
Oh.
When we
Yeah.
get to that agenda item, but I think it's a perfectly reasonable suggestion, but I think
So
that's
for the
Commissioner
record,
Flanagan's
second.
suggestion, that we treat each of these issues one by one.
Yes.
So we'll have that conversation. So unless there's objection, I don't believe a vote is necessary. We just will come back. We have this on the agenda before I finish. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just, as a point of clarification, or I guess maybe it's a further request, I would prefer that if we're talking about the host community agreements, that I don't think that we should be limiting what we're considering to any particular comments. I think that we should just be considering any comments,
Fine.
you know, regarding host community agreements wherever they, you know, they have come from.
Fair enough. I was just
and
setting
that it's not-
expectations in terms of waiting, but yeah, that's perfectly fair.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think it's decided, and you have language that you'd like to, I don't think it's necessary. I think we just agree that we will take this issue back up in 2 weeks. We welcome comments from anybody that wishes to make them. And we will seek guidance, as well as the comments, we will seek guidance from our general counsel on the legal issues.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I just want to be clear as far as setting expectations. I think it's important that we, if this is the commission's decision to accept comments on it, we can accommodate that. We'll post a notice on our website and we'll give folks an avenue by which they can submit comments to the commission's general mailbox. I think it'd be important to get comments by that Monday.
That's fine.
So as to compile and circulate to each of you.
I think that's a great suggestion, so absolutely.
So I would recommend accepting comments through the 6th, August 6th.
Our next meeting is August 9th, that Thursday. I think
right.
that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Just to accommodate us from a staff standpoint of compiling all of that.
Okay. Are we all set? Everybody comfortable?
I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Pell.
So as a matter of process, when we did the draft regulations, I believe we took a vote, and then we had an open comment period, and then when we came back, each of us would make motions for changes based on public comment. So do we want to follow that same process?
Commissioner,
Yeah,
counsel.
I don't think it's necessary. I think you can just defer consideration on this as we described, so. Or do you want?
Well, but I think that there needs to be a motion made by the commission to put the host community agreement out as drafted for comment, leave a comment period open, accept comments until August 6th, and then
I'm fine.
deliberate on those comments
I'm
on
fine
August
with that
9th.
if the commission wants to treat it that way.
I just appreciate
Sure.
I'll take your guidance on this.
I think it's fine if you want to formalize that, that's fine. I don't think it's necessary.
Okay,
but
well, there's no, I guess we can be extra careful, there's no problem.
Exactly.
So can I ask if you would articulate the motion that you're suggesting that we vote on?
I move that we publish the draft guidance on host community agreements that we discussed during today's meeting, that we open a public comment period that will remain open until 5 o'clock on Monday, August 6th.
We've got trouble before 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
And that those comments will be considered by the commission at its next meeting on Thursday, August 9th.
Can I have a second on that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let the commission, or let the record show the commission unanimously approve that recommendation. Thank you. So I think we're ready to move on to the next guidance topic, which is the positive impact plan. And again, my thanks to Commissioner Title for her leadership on this. Are you prepared to talk about this, Commissioner Title?
I don't have a presentation prepared. I
But
think
you're
I
still
just
incredibly
do
articulate, so I'm sure
PowerPoint.
you'll be fine.
So if you look at the draft, it's fairly straightforward. It's a 3-page guidance document, and as the chairman had mentioned earlier, the purpose is to clarify the elements of the positive impact plan. The guidance also clarifies the difference between the plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact and separately the diversity plan. So it goes through the background of the law that led us to pass these requirements, and then it goes through how the commission has interpreted that term, disproportionately impacted communities, and then it explains the elements of a plan, which are goals, programs, and then measurement and accountability, and goes into more background on each of those, along with some examples of positive impact plan programs, but it's very clear that the programs may include but are not limited to the items on that list. And then finally, it discusses metrics for measurement and accountability and the measures that the commission has put into place as examples of metrics, but not necessarily what the plan has to use.
Not requirements.
Great. Again, my thanks to your leadership on this. Are there questions or comments on this? And you're not proposing to defer this?
No.
Okay. Any questions or comments on this document? Commissioner Doyle?
No, it's actually, I just couldn't hear Commissioner Title.
No, she'd like to get, she's seen, we can obviously discuss it, she sees no reason to defer the discussion and vote on this.
Okay, so then, yes. I thought overall this is very good and in fact hit on themes that we have been highlighting as we go around the state, talking to municipalities about, flexible zoning and not just throwing everything into the industrial zone, because that was often what was done with the medical marijuana.
That's the wrong one, that's the wrong one. We're talking
Oh,
about the
sorry.
positive impact plan. You're on
Oh,
the
I
next,
apologize.
you're on the next
I
agenda item, which is
apologize.
equity focused municipal
I
guidelines.
I know there's
We
a
will
lot of
get- we will get to you
overlap
very quickly.
I apologize. I was doing two things at once and look where it got me. So I had no comments on this one. I thought it was fun. Did I scare you? I apologize. I apologize.
But you also set her up for the next one. Now she's really scared about the
Now
next one.
you're, no, but it's good comments. I
Okay.
think you'll get it.
So we are on the guidance on required positive impact plan and diversity plan, just to be clear. Are there any comments or questions from other commissioners?
What? I do. I was doing two things at once.
Commissioner Brown? Commissioner Flanagan?
Nope.
I have no comments. I think, again, this is excellent. I appreciate your leadership. I think this is important as part of our objectives to build a equitable and diverse industry. So I appreciate this, and I think it will be very helpful to the applicants to have clarity on what we're looking for them to provide as part of the application process. So I would like a motion to approve this guidance.
I move to approve this guidance, subject to staff review and changes.
Okay.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Let the record show that Commissioner Tyler made a motion to approve, subject to staff input and modification, editing, and Commissioner McBride seconded the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission has approved this guidance, and again, thank you very much, Commissioner Tyler. I think you're still on point, however. The next item is equity-focused municipal guidance, and I think you've already been put on alert that Commissioner Doyle might have a thing or two to say on this topic. But could you get us started, please?
Sure, and just at the outset, I do suggest that we put this out for public comment for 2 weeks.
Fine. We'll discuss that, but thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, so this is what I'm referring to as local equity guidance, and I would say it's different from our previous guidance in that it is a set of recommendations, purely recommended policies, and they are in response to advice from our Cannabis Advisory Board, as well as several local elected officials that have reached out and said that they want to have an equitable process at the local level, but they're not sure how to do it and would like some recommendations to be walked through the process. So the document starts with a background on the various equity-related provisions in the law, and then it goes through an overview of a series of questions that a city or town could ask and discuss related to its local values and its own equity goals, understanding that every municipality is different. But as a suggestion for how to approach the process, the questions are caps on licenses necessary? What license types will be allowed in the municipality? Should a local excise tax be authorized? How should each license type be zoned? What municipal entity or entities will oversee the prospective licensee process? What process will prospective licensees need to follow, and what is the timeline for that process? And finally, how will prospective licensees be selected to move forward, and what municipal entity or entities will negotiate the host community agreement with them? And then it goes through each question with a set of recommendations. So happy to discuss it now, also happy to make a similar motion as we did on the host community agreement guidance and come back and rediscuss after receiving comment.
So let's have a discussion right now, just so in case there are any issues that are raised. We have 2 weeks to address those issues or concerns, and then based upon the precedent we set with the other guidance, we'll take a vote. But first, let's have a discussion. Are there any comments or questions on this document? Commissioner Doyle, I guess you've already raised your hand, so you're first.
Can I talk about the positive impact?
Sure, please do.
Right. Okay. As I was saying before, this dovetails nicely with some of the things that we've been presenting during municipal outreach. And some of the comments I have are really more mundane and can be, I think, dealt with by staff. We actually learned some things as we went around municipalities in terms of words and references that we used in the municipal guidance that we probably need to correct, and they're repeated here. So I'll make those suggestions, but it's sort of things like references to package stores. Apparently that's a little confusing because Section 15 is broader than that. So I would suggest that we take out those references, and I'll recommend that we take it out of the other municipal guidance as well. And then, again, some of it is more wording things and minor things like typos. One thing that I had a question on is in the buffer zone discussion on page 4, which is about halfway down the page. And so that's where we recite well, we paraphrase the statute and describe it. You know, the statute sets forth the 500-foot buffer around established kindergarten through 12 public or private schools, and identify that the municipalities may choose to reduce the size of that buffer, and caution that it's unclear, it's not a matter that has been reviewed by courts as to whether creating buffer zones at the local level, such as around parks or well, I'm saying playgrounds, it says parks, are legally permissible. I think the next sentence may be just a little strong. And so I think we have the right idea in the rest of the paragraph. I just would like to maybe work on rewording that a little bit.
Okay.
And that, for people following along, it basically just, yeah, the commission suggested additional buffer zones may not be necessary and cautions communities against acting arbitrarily. So I think we could get that same thought across with perhaps different language. So I'd like to work on doing that and bringing that back in that 2 weeks. The next 2 paragraphs after that, and then the paragraph at the top of 5 are probably the area where I'm most uncomfortable, and that is where we are summarizing the state of research on certain issues related to marijuana today, and that makes me very uncomfortable doing that as a commission. And I think the same points that we're making in here can be made without characterizing research a certain way, and so I would prefer to pull those out while still retaining the underlying thought about you know, being very responsible as a community in terms of looking at what the actual impacts on a community are when you put a marijuana facility in it. So that's essentially my comment on that.
And you're willing to propose or work with Commissioner Tyler and staff on
absolutely.
alternative language?
Yeah.
That would accomplish the same objective?
And
Yep.
yeah, I think there's actually already language here that we can use and get to the same place without referring to that research or characterizing research out there, because research is ongoing and will change on a regular basis. I think the last very substantive thing on the same area of the guidance is the issue of And I applaud the thought here in terms of making a streamlined process on the municipal level. And for those who don't have this in front of them, the section starts off, what municipal entity or entities will oversee the prospective licensee process, select licensees to move forward, and negotiate host community agreements. And then the guidance goes on to suggest that it essentially, if I'm understanding it correctly, should be one entity that does both. And my concern is that I don't think that is typically done either at the state level or the municipal level, where we've got open meeting law bodies involved. Looking at us as an example, typically our staff or the executive director or general counsel will negotiate a contract and then present it to us. So I'm a little worried if we suggested it be one body, we're actually going to slow the process down, because open meeting law bodies take time to meet, etc. So if we can get, if we perhaps can work together on that same thought and maybe refine it a little.
I mean, it's clear the objective is to try to make it as efficient as
Exactly.
possible, and I think that we all share that objective, so.
Yeah.
Anything else, Commissioner Hill?
I'm just checking that it's, on page 6, it's the second to last paragraph.
Regardless of the-
And yes, and so what this is discussing is encouraging municipalities to develop a clear process and timeline for prospective licensees, which obviously we all want. I think that helps the public follow along. It helps applicants be clear about what process we're supposed to follow. And I just wanted to discuss with you the wording here, because when I read it, it suggested to me a procurement-like model, and that may not be the intent, because my concern with procurement-like models is that does tend to favor the more well-financed, larger applicants, and so I would just be concerned about suggesting only that.
This is the paragraph starting with regardless of the entity.
Yeah.
All right.
Anything else, Commissioner?
Nope, that's it
Thank
for
you.
me, thank you.
Commissioner?
Could I?
Yeah, go ahead,
sorry.
Commissioner.
Those are all very valuable, reasonable comments, so I thank you for that. On the second to last paragraph, yes, if you would just suggest an edit that doesn't suggest
Yeah.
a procurement process, that's fine.
Yep.
The previous one on the different entities who might be subject to open meeting law, that's a hard yes, I agree. I did try to actually suggest that in the last sentence of that section, where it says the municipality may prefer to designate one entity to oversee the selection process and another to negotiate the host community agreements, but if there's a way to make that the primary recommendation and specify more.
Yeah, I just have to work with you on language to
Okay.
see if we can tease that out a little.
Okay, and then, so on page 4, with regard to the buffer zone, so my original draft was actually way, way stronger, but I anticipated. So, and I'm definitely not, just to put everybody, I'm not gonna put anybody on staff, on the spot. But I did ask for help from the general counsel, and then as far as the research, I actually asked Dr. Johnson to rewrite it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be fine, if everyone else is, with delegating the presentation of that research to the staff, so that we're not sort of arguing about research amongst us.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
clear what you mean on delegating.
Well, okay, so if we are rewriting those 2 paragraphs, I think you could present it in several different ways to make several different points, right? So if we were to delegate to the staff to review the research and represent in the most accurate way possible these issues and the current research on it, that would be my preference over leaving it out, because I think that we do have a duty on us to represent what the facts are and what the evidence show. I think it's important for this decision making.
Okay, and so I think we just may be in different places on that, and maybe we can talk in the next 2 weeks. I have a discomfort with it.
Yeah, my preference for this would be, let's work on this issue. I understand your point, but let's work on this issue over the next 2 weeks, and if we do have another conversation and have to vote, we'll have some. So let's just agree to work on this, given that
we have, not complete alignment, or at least comfort with the language. But I'm actually quite comfortable just given this conversation that we're going to come back with something that I think we're all going to be pretty close to the line with. But let's work on that over the next 2 weeks rather than discuss it today or debate it today, if that's okay.
That's fine. I do think we should, we don't have to talk about it right now, but I do think that we should be comfortable presenting what research says on
Process on page 5, and it says what process will prospective licenses need to follow and what is the timeline. Like, that's regulatory. That's the stuff that I think we should put in here. And while I appreciate all the work that Dr. Johnson has done and is doing on our research piece of this, maybe this should be a little more black and white and clear.
I think that's the same point that Commissioner Doyle made, and I think that is actually a worthy conversation. I think that's the conversation that Commissioner Title was suggesting we have. So I think let's work on this specific document and this issue, but then we'll also have the broader conversation, to your point, Commissioner Flanagan, about how we use and how we reference research in our document. So I think I'm completely moving forward with that. Commissioner McBride? So then, just as we had precedent for host community agreement guidance, can I get a recommendation that we agree to the language? I'm trying to remember your language, Commissioner McBride, but if you have a Commissioner Title, but essentially to put this on the agenda for 2 weeks to work the issue in the interim, allow for public comment up to 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on August 6th.
I move that we publish the draft guidance on local equity and open a public comment period, open until 5 p.m. EST, Monday, August 6th.
August 6th. And it's on the agenda for next time. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let the commission know, let the record show the commission unanimously approve that. And again, my thanks to Commissioner Title for your work on this.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just as an aside related to the publication of this, we will also circulate it to the entire advisory board, both pieces.
I think that's a great idea.
To explicitly solicit their feedback.
I think that's a great idea. The next agenda item, I think, is going to be a little bit more straightforward, perhaps, but Commissioner Doyle, would you take the lead on the report to the legislature?
Yes, thank you. And I would like to acknowledge the contributions of our Director of Government Affairs, David Lakeman, and our General Counsel, Christina Bailey, as well as our Executive Director, Sean Collins, in helping bring this document to where it is today and hopefully getting it filed with the legislature. This is a statutory requirement that we comment on the state of the participation of agriculture, farmers, and businesses of all sizes in the marijuana for adult use industry. And so we have prepared a legislative report that provides background and history on how we got to where we are today. It explains the governing law, explains the work done by the commission and its staff, and talks about the different licensing opportunities that are specifically targeted to farmers and businesses of all sizes, as well as the production growth controls on cultivation of marijuana. It also talks about the the steps taken under the leadership of the chairman to reduce fee structure and costs for small businesses and the agricultural community related to the adult use for marijuana industry. It also discusses training that will be available particularly after July 1st, 2019 through the Responsible Vendor Training Program, which in itself may create business opportunities for those who do not wish to engage directly in the adult use marijuana business, but are willing to provide training to those that do, as well as the training provided through our social equity program and the opportunities that that will create for small businesses and farmers. We also discuss operating requirements, including security, and how that works to benefit small businesses and farmers, as well as discussing very specific issues relating to farmers regarding agricultural preservation restrictions and what's known as 61A law, that refers to General Law Chapter 61A, which is tax protection for land in agricultural use. And particularly with regard to this section, I must recognize that we, in developing this report, worked with the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources and very much appreciate the very substantive and thoughtful comments they provided to us on the report. We also recommend legislation to protect the trade secrets and other commercial or financial information of farmers and or businesses of all sizes to essentially add to, with regard to the Cannabis Control Commission solely, an additional exemption that mimics an exemption available under federal law to protect trade secrets and commercial or financial information obtained from a person to the Cannabis Control Commission if such information is deemed by the Commission to be privileged or confidential. And you will be informed in that determination by an abundance of federal case law on the interpretation of the parallel federal law on this issue. So we are recommending that the legislature consider that. We highlight some other complications under federal law as it relates to marijuana, most of which are well known, and look forward to submitting this to the legislature.
Thank you again for your leadership. Any comments or questions? Commissioner McBride?
I just want to thank Commissioner Doyle. I know that a ton of work went into this and that it was not necessarily the easiest document to pull together. So I just wanted to state my appreciation for the work that you did on it. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Commissioner Tyler?
I agree. I want to thank Commissioner Doyle for all of your work on this and your just passion for helping out farmers in general and in understanding their very complicated issues. I don't have any suggested changes to the document, but I do have a suggestion about our next report, which is due at the end of this year.
Yes.
I think it's probably safe to say that we will likely have concerns about the participation of farmers and businesses of all sizes. I believe it's already in our research agenda that we are tracking the numbers and that we are tracking the barriers to entry. I would suggest or propose that a month before the next report is due, we have a report on those items and that we discuss amongst ourselves our additional recommendations for legislation for that second report.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just for context of that, so Commissioner Tuttle, I've written a note to do that. This statutory section requires us to submit the report to the Joint Committee on Marijuana Policy, as we did with the previous report relative to the DPH transfer. It also includes the House and Senate Committees on Ways and Means, and I will also submit it to the House and Senate clerks, just so that the entire legislature has access to it. The due date, of course, was 1 year of passage of the law, so that's why it's at 28th. The next report is due the end of the calendar year, so I'll make a note to.
End of this calendar year?
Correct.
Okay. Any other comments? Then can I have a motion to approve the release of this report to the bodies that the executive director just articulated?
So moved.
Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let the record show that the Commission unanimously approved the release of this report. Again, my thanks and our thanks to Commissioner Doyle for your leadership. Next topic is economic empowerment applicants, and I just want to make a few comments before we get started on this. One is, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, at our last meeting 2 weeks ago, Commissioner Tuttle asked that we put this agenda item on our agenda for the next meeting, which we have done. As I've mentioned, there was a survey that was released on Friday to the 300 plus applicants for priority status, economic empowerment priority status. We have 60 plus responses. We will hopefully get more responses in a subsequent meeting. I think discuss this in more detail, but I think at a very high level, it identifies some issues that we want to at least be aware of and discuss. And so we are going to put up one slide with just some high level summaries, but I can't caveat enough that we can't jump to conclusions or take this as gospel based upon what is right now a relatively small number of responses compared to the audience that we're seeking input from. But I still think it's important to put high level on the table as long as I provide that caveat. The other thing is that I also want to provide a second caveat, which is this is a concern I think that we all have, in that the law is very clear on the requirements of how this industry rolls out and how it affects and includes
candidates from disproportionately impacted communities and from other diversity targets. We take that seriously. We will monitor it. We will change what we're doing if we see it's not working, and we're not going to rest until it's done. I take that commitment extraordinarily seriously, and I think I can speak for the other commission members as well. So I think it's very important that we discuss this and start talking about how it's working and how we might want to try to help these sets of objectives along. I will also, though, caveat this by saying it's early, and I personally I'm not ready to draw any conclusions after 7 provisional licenses, or 5 provisional licenses have been issued and 7 more will be discussed today. I think it is premature to draw any conclusions about how this industry is going to evolve. It's going to take some time. As I said, we will monitor how this process works. We will tweak whatever we need to tweak to make it work. If we need to go back to the legislature and ask for changes in legislation, we will do so. We will not rest until we get this right. But let's not, as I said, jump to conclusions after 5 provisional licenses have been issued. I really appreciate people's understanding and patience of that. With that said, Commissioner Tyler, before I show the high-level results of the survey, do you have other comments you'd like to make?
I don't think the survey results will be breaking news to anyone in the room.
No, I think that's fair. So we have 2 slides. One is just the high level of the survey itself, and Commissioner Tyler, since provide the leadership on survey, would you mind describing kind of how it was prepared and how it was distributed?
Sure. Actually, I need to thank several members of our staff, but particularly Dr. Julie Johnson, Cedric Sinclair, and Martine Russell for their help turning this around in time for us to review it today. So this survey was primarily to identify the barriers that the economic empowerment applicants are facing, and to do so now because we only have 3 applications from those 123 applicants.
3 completed now.
3 completed. Well,
3 were all 4 packets have been submitted.
Right. All 4 packets is different from completed because if it was completed, due to the fact that they have priority, it would have come in front of us by now.
Right.
So it was sent on Friday. As of yesterday, we received 63 responses. The survey remains open. There are also some fill-in-the-blank questions, particularly if you identified an additional barrier to entry that wasn't listed. So I expect when the survey closes, we'll get a look at that.
Is there a close date on the survey, just for public information?
I don't know.
Not as of today, but I think that's something we need to set an expectation for.
We probably should, because I do commit to, at some future point, when we've got a greater level of response and a chance to review some of the written comments, that we come back and have a much more complete discussion of the survey at a subsequent meeting. Any other comments before we show the high-level data, Commissioner Town?
And so the survey asked if you did not apply, why not? And then asked the respondents to check all of the answers that were applicable and then to rank them from 1 to 5 and also include any other reasons. So you can see in the order that they were ranked in some: difficulty raising funds or capital, still developing business concept or plan, difficulty obtaining approval from a city or town, my desired license type is not offered, specifically social consumption or delivery, and difficulty understanding the application.
Do you have any comments, or can I invite comments from other commissioners or questions?
Well,
Commissioner Flanagan?
I have a couple of concerns that, given the fact that over 300 were sent out and we've only gotten roughly 60 back, that this is very preliminary. The second thing is that we are all moving down the same path at the same time, and I feel that the fact that this is a new process for many people here in Massachusetts, that we need to keep in mind the fact that when it comes to funding and it comes to business plans and it comes to dealing with the cities and towns, that is going to be a concern early on, because everyone is sort of getting their ducks in a row at the same time. And I don't mean to harp on the cities and towns, because I realize that they're facing a lot in a short amount of time. But the reality is that I really feel that we're doing as much as we can as a commission to move this process forward. I think given the fact that the license type that people want are not offered, that's not going to change until we take up the regs again. We know that conversation is coming. So if people are holding out, I don't see that as a barrier. I see that as a fact that we promised to take the conversation up. We are going to take that conversation up when we open the regs. And so people can either choose to try to do something else or they can wait it out. But there's also no guarantee that those two types of deliveries, those two types of licenses are even going to come to fruition. We just don't know that yet because we haven't had the conversation. Having said that, I think that given our community outreach division of our commission, Shakia is doing a great job when she's starting to go out and talk to people in the community. That's going to help this process. We realize that the money piece of this is difficult. Short of being able to go to a bank, people are trying to find creative ways to fund their plans. And I really think that we can have a more substantive conversation once we've gotten more responses back. I think that, if we're very strategic about this, if we're very thoughtful about this, give people time. I'm impressed that this many people responded since Friday because that's a quick turnaround. But I think that we need to have this conversation a little bit down the road as people are coming online and people are being part of the process. I can see the concern. I understand the concerns. Clearly looking at this graph, but I think this is also this also has the possibility to spark some fear in people who may now say, wait, if all these people are having problems, I may not want to participate, and we don't want to do that. We want this to be an as inclusive process as possible. Coming from North Central Massachusetts, we're often the last people thought of in the Commonwealth. But if you go to the Berkshires, they're saying that they're often the last people thought of in the Commonwealth. There are different types of thoughts about this in different parts of the state, and I think we just need to work the plan that we have with the community outreach person, the social equity program that we have, and then people will start to understand and will be able to get some of the services that they've been looking for and some of the supportive services like business plan creation and funding and banking and all the things that are going to be part of that.
Commissioner McBride? You want to use my microphone? Here.
I just had an additional suggestion because I've been in the municipal, thinking about cities and towns forever, it seems. Given that data point,
You're talking about the difficulty
obtaining approval from a city or town. Could we add a question to the survey asking what cities, what municipalities the folks responding have been talking to? And the reason I ask that is because it kind of goes to that general question about trying to collect as much info as we can to differentiate what's anecdotal versus what is a real issue, and to that end, where there is something that can be done to help resolve that issue. And the other piece of this, and I'll throw this out there, I know that I've talked about it before, and it's something that one of the first meetings when I was appointed to this commission that I had, this issue about host community agreements in cities and towns was brought up at that point in time. And I said at that point in time to the individuals in the meeting, it would be really helpful if we could have a conversation with municipalities that were on the positive side of this, that were on the side where they were thinking about this and actively putting pieces into place to welcome businesses and present a forum or some sort of whether it was a forum with a webinar or some sort of event where there could be a conversation that wasn't necessarily this commission talking about it, but was actually municipalities presenting to other municipalities about where there were opportunities and how they were approaching it. Because I think as we've talked about all the way along, my sense here is that there are a lot of municipalities that are stepping back and sort of waiting to see what the lay of the land looks like, and waiting to see what's my neighbor going to do? And, I kind of want to look and see what they're doing before I dip my toe in here. So I think that this is to sort of dovetail with what Commissioner Flanagan just said. I think that there are a lot of pieces here that can still come into play. I look forward to getting the full spectrum of results from this survey, but I think that there are other components here that we also need to be asking and also need to be talking about.
No, I agree. Thank you. Other comments? You have Commissioner Doyle?
I would just like to add my support for a breakdown to get better understanding of that particular difficulty obtaining approval from a city or town. It would be interesting to get more detail on that.
Is that it?
That's it.
So I started this conversation by saying, these are preliminary results, and being trained in statistics, I know that you can't jump to conclusions, and I do think it's important that we get hopefully a greater level of response and get the kind of more specificity that Commissioner Doyle and Commissioner McBride were requesting. That being said, I look at this and my own reaction is, difficulty getting funds. That's not a surprise. We know that. It's something we've been working on. If anything, it kind of incents me personally to just work harder on that, because I think it's ultimately, in my opinion, going to be the biggest obstacle. But so I think that's one point. The other thing that comes out of this is, even though it's preliminary and even though it's 10 people, difficulty understanding the application, we should find out if that's an issue, because that's an easy fix. That's an easy fix. And so to me, this is not kind of a scorecard. It's not who's doing what wrong or anything. It's pretty interesting and things that are worth considering and pursuing. And I thought you were heading in this direction, but then you took kind of a detour, Commissioner McBride. One of the things that I think would be useful, I think surveys are great, and we should get some more data here. I think focus groups are actually far more helpful in terms of really understanding issues, and my suggestion would be, obviously we need the help of our staff on this. My suggestion would be maybe let this go for a little while longer, get some more feedback and survey responses. But once we have something that's a little bit more concrete in terms of statistical significance, I actually think we should have some focus groups around the state where we just listen to some of these applicants and hear firsthand what are they running into in terms of municipal issues. If they're not understanding the application, what is it that's confusing? Because again, that's an easy fix for us. But I think the best way we're going to get, I think the survey is great, but I think it should be followed up by focus groups, and clearly we need to do a few around the state if people agree with that proposal. So I would suggest that that's something that we would pursue. I'm happy to work with the executive director and the staff in terms of how to organize that and bring it back to the commission for approval. But I think that would be a really important next step and something we should do relatively quickly.
I'm delighted to say I believe that's already in the works. I believe Dr. Johnson.
It's always the best ideas are always the staff doing it before I've even thought of it, so that's great.
We're working on it.
That's wonderful to hear.
But to your point about the understanding the application, I take great pride in our application.
And I wasn't being critical. I wasn't being critical whatsoever.
And I will endeavor to talk to those 10 folks.
So you better not say that.
So we are working.
So there's good follow-up, and I do commit, as I said earlier, to we should talk. Do we want to put a time limit on the survey? But I do commit to bringing this back onto the agenda when we've had we get hopefully some more responses. So what are your thoughts, Mr. Director, about that time limit on the survey?
Well, so I think we definitely need a time. We need to close it at some point. I think it's worth identifying. It hasn't even been out there for a week yet, so we do have about 20% response. I will talk with folks on the staff about at what percentage response rate do we kind of deem it to be substantive or sufficient enough to be scientific, but also wanting to make sure we can send possibly a reminder to those folks to complete the survey, and then also bearing in mind we need some time to turn around and compile those responses, especially since some questions do have a narrative response.
So I guess what I'll say is I won't commit at this point to have a discussion of this on the agenda next time, because we might not have all that done, but I will commit to, at the next commission meeting, having a timeline for having it on the agenda at a subsequent meeting.
That's fair.
Commissioner Powell?
So I really like those suggestions. They largely echo what I had on my list for me at next steps. I do think it's worth noting out loud that the law is clear that we shall prioritize review and licensing decisions for these applicants, and the fact that the benefit here is priority means that the more time goes on and the more licenses we grant, the less meaningful that benefit becomes. So I do think there is a sense of urgency here that we should recognize. Absolutely love the idea of a working group with those cities. The General Counsel had mentioned that as well. If you'd like, Commissioner McBride, I would like to take the lead with you on forming that. If the staff is okay with it.
I'm definitely happy to do that, but I actually am sort of, I guess I'm kind of throwing it out there that I would actually love to see an organization other than the commission putting something like that together. I mean, if it's something where, you know, the imprimatur of the commission would be helpful, then I can appreciate that. But I guess I've thrown it out there to a lot of people and no one's taking up on it, so maybe the timing
Well,
is
I
right
think
to
somebody
kind of
did
put
throw
it
it. I
together.
can't find out which commissioner title.
Well, I guess then as part of the public comment, the organizations that are interested could let us know. I would add to, in terms of the suggestion to add to the survey what municipalities the applicants have been speaking to. I think that's a good idea. Also, as part of the public comment period, they could certainly reach out to us and let us know about that as well. Yes. So I had another great suggestion which came from our advisory board, Kim Napoli in particular, who had been working with commission members on presentations to lawyers that laid out the regulations and the application process, and she suggested doing similar events for econ empowerment applicants. Thought that makes sense.
Any other comments?
Yes, one more.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. I think this is my last one. I do think it's important that all 5 of us hear directly from the econ empowerment applicants as opposed to just seeing the survey results, because as several people have mentioned, there are limitations when you
That was
just
my
read a bar
point about
graph.
the
Therefore,
focus groups. Go ahead.
I suggest that we explore partnering with cities, perhaps the large cities on our disproportionate areas of impact list, on organizing hearings and having different commissioners attend them and hear from the public, particularly inviting the econ empowerment applicants.
Can I just ask you for a specific definition of word hearings? When I think of hearings, I think it's something very formal as opposed to listening sessions like we did at the beginning of our process, and I'm not sure what you're proposing.
I think we could leave that up to the cities that we're exploring this with, if they're interested.
Okay. Do we
Yeah.
have a general counsel?
Yeah, no, I share your concern that it's probably better to, I apologize.
You gotta
I
hold
share
that.
your concern that it's probably better
You
to,
gotta be a little closer to the mic.
I share your concern that it may be better to focus, to basically characterize these as more as a listening session. We could also defer consideration of how to best do that and
Well,
consider.
let's work offline on this and develop a plan, and we'll bring it back. But, I think we're talking about the same thing. I just want to be careful about exactly how they're characterized. But you learn much more by listening to people and being able to ask them questions than
Seeing survey responses. Those surveys are great. So I think we're all on board with doing something. I don't think a motion is necessary on this. We have some work to do, which is good. I will say I share Commissioner Title's sense of urgency, not because we have only 3 applicants thus far and we've only given 5 provisional licenses, none of which are to economic empowerment. That is not my source of concern. My source of concern is exactly the same, or urgency is exactly the same as Commissioner Title, which is that priority loses its benefit if it lasts too long. So I think this is something, while these data are not conclusive, we will get more information both through the survey and through the other mechanisms we just talked about. I personally have an enormous sense of urgency about figuring this out and continuing to learn how to make this happen. So if there are no other comments on this topic, I think the last topic for discussion is a request from the executive director to have the authority to constitute the suitability review committee. So do you have a specific request, Mr. Executive Director?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, the Commission maintains, pursuant to Chapter 94G, the ability to, and maintains all powers necessary to carry out and effectuate the purpose of the underlying statute, which of course includes the authority to establish a registration and license application process. Embedded within that is the ability to make suitability determinations. The regulations that were promulgated pursuant to the law allow that the commission may, in its exercise of its discretion, make a suitability determination, but it goes on to say that the commission may also delegate suitability determinations to the executive director, who may appoint a suitability review committee to advise me in that process. So as you see, it's very permissive language, but it's not definitive, and therefore I would seek the approval from the commission, and I would seek that delegation to me, and also the purpose of that is actually to establish a suitability review committee and of course a process related to that. So as we endeavor to get through those remaining applications, in the event that something were to come up related to suitability, we could make sure that that process was available to applicants. Of course, continuing as we have will be a recommendation from me to the commission, and included in that will be a suitability recommendation. That said, I think to build out that process, this delegation would be necessary.
Thank you. Are there comments or questions for the executive director? And can I have a motion to approve granting the executive director the delegation requested?
So moved.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, let the record show Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner McBride. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Let the record show the commission unanimously approved this delegation of authority to the executive director. I would request an update at some subsequent meeting relatively soon, what you have done with this authority in terms of the committee structure and process.
Happy to.
Thank you. I believe that is it for agenda items with respect to discussion. And so I think our next agenda item is to listen to the staff's recommendations and discuss and vote on 7 completed license applications. I'm not going to read them all now, but I will go through them one by one and then ask for the recommendation of the staff on each of these, starting with Alternative Therapies Group, Tier 5 Cultivation, MCN 281255.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will review these as efficiently but as thoroughly as possible. So, as you indicated, the first application for your consideration today, the entity is named Alternative Therapies Group. The application is MCN 281255. The proposed address of the establishment is 10 Industrial Way in Amesbury. The application is for a cultivation license, a Tier 5 indoor cultivation, which, as you know, authorizes a 30,001 to 40,000 square feet of canopy. This applicant has 3 other license applications before the commission, 2 of which are before you today for consideration. The remaining licenses for a retail application. The individuals that have been identified, and they are the same in each application, are Christopher Edwards as an executive, Julio Fuentes as an executive, George Christie as an executive, and Derek Brock as an executive. There were no other entities that have direct or indirect authority over this establishment. This application, or this applicant, is a priority applicant as an existing RMD. They are in compliance with DPH. They intend to be co-located with the adult use business in the town of Amesbury, or city of Amesbury, excuse me. They have a final certificate of registration for dispensing, cultivation, and processing. Their host community agreement was executed with Amesbury on April 3rd, and certification to that effect has been provided. They conducted their community outreach meeting on April 19th and published it within 7 days, or with 7 days notice, in the Newburyport Daily News. Certification of notifications to the municipality as well as the abutters has been provided, as well as compliance with the meeting requirements pursuant to our regulations. No objections were raised when the municipal notice was sent to Amesbury. We received a response from the municipality on July 11th, stating the applicant is in fact in compliance with all local ordinances and bylaws. A summary of their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact includes conducting career fairs in Haverhill and Lynn, scheduling and conducting interviews with individuals from those areas, offering job skill assessments, and providing guidance for interested parties to receive training relevant to the establishment's positions, continuing to make charitable donations to local nonprofit organizations, and finally conducting food drives to benefit local food pantries. As it pertains to suitability, no concerns were raised during the background check on individuals associated with the application, and similarly no concerns were raised on the entities associated with the applications. There were no disclosures of any past civil or criminal actions, and no disclosures of any occupational license issues in other jurisdictions or in Massachusetts, and similarly no disclosures of any business interests in other jurisdictions. They have secured a certificate of good standing from both the Secretary of the Commonwealth as well as the Department of Revenue. Again, they are a proposed cultivation license in this context. They propose that they can be operational immediately upon being granted a final license, as they're an existing R&D and have all human and capital expenditures required to begin operations. They have a special permit to operate the facility, which was granted on June 25th, and no additional construction would be required at that location. They also currently use a point-of-sale system programmed already to virtually separate sales of medical and adult use products. Their proposed hours of operations are Monday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. They've submitted, in compliance with the regulations, summaries of the following plans, policies, and procedures: a security plan, a prevention of diversion plan, a storage of marijuana plan, a transportation plan, inventory procedures, quality control and testing procedures, personnel procedures, dispensing procedures, record-keeping procedures, maintenance of financial records policy, and finally a diversity plan. All of these summaries are fully compliant with the regulations and have been determined to be substantively compliant with our regulations. In full compliance, of course, will be reviewed during our inspections and will be required before a final license is issued. As far as their diversity plan, they intend to they have the following goals, which include the following: a diverse workforce, building upon an already diverse workforce of executives and managers, an inclusive work environment, providing an inclusive and flexible environment for employees by identifying and removing any remaining systemic barriers to equitable access, participation, and progression in employment, so that all employees have the opportunity to fully contribute to life at the company. They will implement a range of proactive and preventative strategies and programs, including training and professional development opportunities for their employees to raise awareness of equal opportunity discrimination, bullying, and harassment, and provide strategies to prevent this from occurring in the workplace. Similarly, they intend to support domestic violence victims. The applicant aims to create a working environment that allows employees to safely seek support to address issues arising from domestic and family violence, and recognizes that employees may face situations of domestic and family violence that may have an impact on their attendance and productivity at work, and that they are therefore committed to providing support to employees, again, who are affected by domestic and family violence. And lastly, they intend to perform staff surveys, analyze the results, and identify areas for improvement and take corrective steps. Their cultivation plan includes the following: an extremely pure water supply, state-of-the-art climate control, minimal amount of chemicals, and properly sanitized conditions and tools to minimize, to the extent possible, the spread of any contaminants. The summary provides further detail with regard to policies and procedures at each of the following stages: propagation of seeds and clones, cloning and cutting, vegetation, flowering, and harvesting. Because this is a cultivation license, there are no products that will be manufactured, and similarly, they are not planning to sell retail and for this license, obviously, so that is not applicable here. Therefore, the Commission staff recommend issuing a provisional license with the following conditions. Final license is subject to the required individual successfully completing a fingerprint-based check of state and national criminal history databases. Final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with DPH regulations. Final license is subject to the inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with the requirements listed in the regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that their facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. The applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to the Commission's investigators, agents, and employees upon request. And finally, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee pursuant to our regulations. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth, its suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. We certify that a due diligence review has been performed, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and demonstrate the suitability for licensure. Accordingly, we recommend this applicant for provisional licensure with the previously stated conditions.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Then can I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation to grant a provisional license to Alternative Therapies Group, MCN 281255 for Tier 5 cultivation?
So moved. Second.
Let the record show that Commissioner McBride made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Flanagan. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show that this was unanimously, the recognition of the staff was unanimously approved. Thank you. Alternative therapy groups, again, MRN 281346 for retailing.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Same entity, application MRN 281346. The location of this establishment, though, is different, which is 49 Macy Street, Amesbury. The license is for retail. Again, they have 3 other applications before the commission. The executives are the same: Christopher Edwards, Julio Fuentes, George Christie, and Derek Brock. And as before, there are no other entities associated with the application that have direct or indirect authority over the establishment. They have maintained their priority status and are in compliance with DPH. They intend this adult use retail location will not be co-located with the RMD. Their current RMD dispensary is located in Salem. They have obtained their final certificate of registration for dispensing, cultivation, and processing through the Department of Public Health. Their host community agreement was also executed on April 3rd, and certification has been provided to the Commission. Their community outreach meeting was also held on April 19th, with publication at least 7 days prior in the Newburyport Daily News. Certification of notice was submitted that included notice to the municipality as well as the butters, and they've met the meeting requirements. No objections were communicated to the Commission from Amesbury. We received a response on July 11th stating the applicant is in compliance with all local ordinances and bylaws, and their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact is the same as their cultivation license, which is to conduct career fairs in Haverhill and Lynn, scheduling and conducting interviews with individuals from those areas, offering job skill assessments, and providing guidance for interested parties to receive training relevant to the establishment's position, continuing to make charitable donations to local nonprofit organizations, and finally conducting food drives to benefit local food pantries. There were no concerns that were arisen during the background check of individuals or on entities associated with the application, and no disclosures of any past civil or criminal actions, no disclosures of any past or any occupational license issues, and no disclosure of any business interests in other jurisdiction. They have obtained certificate of good standing from the Secretary of the Commonwealth as well as the Department of Revenue. As far as the management and operations, the proposed timeline to become operational is that the applicant states that construction at this new location will commence in late July and should be completed by mid-September. Construction should be subject to architectural approval from the Commission. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Sunday, 9 a.m. to 6:45 p.m. They've submitted the summaries of the following plans: policies and procedures, their security plan, prevention of diversion plan, storage of marijuana plan, transportation plan, inventory procedures, quality control and testing procedures, personnel policies, dispensing procedures, record-keeping procedures, maintenance of financial records policy, and a diversity plan. They are compliant with submitting all of those summaries. And those summaries have been determined to be substantially compliant with the requirements of our regulations. And of course, full compliance will be reviewed during inspections and will be required before a final license is issued. As indicated previously, the summary of the diversity plan includes the following goals: diverse workforce, inclusive work environment, support for domestic violence victims, and finally statistics and reassessments. This is a retail license, so there is no cultivation plan. There's also no summary of products to be produced. However, their plan for obtaining marijuana or marijuana products is that they are currently a vertically integrated DPH RMD for cultivation, processing, and dispensing medical marijuana. The applicant is also applying for an adult use cultivation and product manufacturing license and plans to supply its products for retail purposes. The staff is recommending issuing a provisional license with the following conditions. Final license is subject to the required individual successfully completing a fingerprint-based check of state and national criminal history databases. Final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with DPH regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with the requirements listed in our regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that the facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. The applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to commission investigators, agents, employees upon request, and finally that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee pursuant to regulations. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth, suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. Commission staff certify that a due diligence review of the application has been performed, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and its suitability for licensure, and accordingly, the applicant is therefore recommended for a provisional license with the previously stated conditions.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments to the Executive Director? Can I have a motion, please, to approve the staff recommendation to approve a license for alternative therapy, a provisional license for alternative therapy groups, MRN 281346 for retailing?
So moved.
Have a second, please.
Second.
Let the record show Commissioner McBride made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously accepts the staff recommendation on this license. Thank you very much. The next license is again for Alternative Therapies Group, MPN 281300 for product manufacturing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is Alternative Therapies Group. The proposed address is 10 Industrial Way in Amesbury. This is the same location as the previously considered cultivation license. Again, they have three additional applications pending before the Commission. The executives proposed are the same as before: Christopher Edwards, Julio Fuentes, George Christie, and Derek Brock. And there are no entities that appear to have direct or indirect control over the marijuana establishment that differ from those presented. They have secured their R&D priority status and remain in compliance with DPH. This will be a co-located business with their existing medical operation in Amesbury, and they have obtained their final certificate of registration. The host community agreement was executed on April 3rd. Community outreach meeting and certification has been provided. Community outreach meeting was held on April 19th. Notice was published in the Newburyport Daily News, and notice was sent to the municipality as well as the abutters. And finally, they certified that they were in compliance with the meeting requirements. No objections were raised with the Commission. We received a response from the municipality on July 11th, stating that they are in compliance with all local ordinances and bylaws. Their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact is the same as previously stated: to conduct career fairs at Haverhill and Lynn, to schedule and conduct formal interviews with individuals from those areas, offering job skill assessments, and providing guidance for interested parties to receive training relevant to the establishment's positions, continuing to make charitable donations to local nonprofit organizations, and conducting food drives to benefit local food pantries. There were no concerns that were arisen during the background check on individuals or entities, and no disclosures of any past civil or criminal actions, no disclosures of any occupational license issues, and no disclosure of any business interests in other jurisdictions. They have secured their certificate of good standing with the Secretary of the Commonwealth as well as the Department of Revenue. As far as their operations review, management operations review, the proposed timeline to become operational is that they could be operational immediately upon being granted a final license, their existing R&D, and have all needed human and capital expenditures to begin operations. They've already made those expenditures. Special permit to operate the facility was granted on June 25th, and no additional construction is required at this site. They currently use a point-of-sale system program to virtually separate sales of medical and adult use products. Their proposed hours are Monday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. They submitted the required summaries of plans, policies, and procedures, including a security plan, prevention and diversion plan, storage of marijuana plan, transportation plan, inventory procedures, quality control and testing procedures, personnel procedures, dispensing procedures, record-keeping procedures, maintenance of financial records policy, and diversity plan. They're fully compliant with submitting those summaries, and those summaries have been deemed to be substantially compliant with our regulations. Full compliance will be reviewed during our inspection and will be required before a final license is issued. Their summary of the diversity plan is the same as previously stated: a diverse workforce, an inclusive work environment, support for domestic violence victims, and statistics and reassessments. Again, there's no cultivation plans. This is a product manufacturing license. Therefore, the following products intend to be produced or sold: 1 ounce tinctures, dark chocolates, milk chocolates, white chocolates, capsules, topical salve, distillates, cartridges, oils, and keefs. Again, because it's product manufacturing, there's no plan for obtaining marijuana or marijuana products, and it's not retail. The commission staff recommends issuing a provisional license with the following conditions. Final license is subject to the required individual successfully completing a fingerprint-based check of state and national criminal history databases. Final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with EPA's regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with the requirements listed in our regulations. Final license subject to inspection or audit to ascertain that its facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. The applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to the Commission's investigators, agents, and employees upon request. And finally, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee pursuant to regulations. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth, its suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. Commission staff certify that a due diligence review of the application has been performed, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and its suitability for licensure. Therefore, the applicant is recommended for a provisional license with the previously indicated condition.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Yeah, I just have I just have a question for application, not a specific license, but just in general. When we're talking about manufacturer, you say the plan for obtaining marijuana or marijuana products is not applicable. Isn't there a requirement to obtain marijuana if you only have a manufacturing license? So I'm curious about that. Again, it's not specific to this application, but going forward.
It's in that context, I guess perhaps it's how we present it as far as the executive summary. I try to break out if it's a specific license type. So their cultivation plan, their product manufacturing plan, or where they intend to obtain final product.
I understand that, but would we want and shouldn't we want to know if you're an intermediate like a manufacturer where you're obtaining your raw material?
So of course we do, absolutely. That will be something that is so this is really a summary of the overall application. If that information was not presented to the commission, and I guess I'm going to speak very broadly to any application.
This was a broad question.
Right, we would want to know that information,
Right.
and certainly intend to follow up based on that information when we visit for an inspection of where they intend to secure. So for instance, in a manufacturing context, if they intend to produce extracts, where they intend on getting flour from in order to do that. So the way it's presented here is if it's a cultivation license.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying. I guess I'm asking if it would be appropriate. And, everything's in the license, and we all obviously look at the license application, not just your review.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the way you present the review, it strikes me that at all stages, where you get the input for that stage would be valuable information.
And that is something that we do secure.
Okay, great. Okay. Unless there are any questions, can I have a recommendation, or can I have a motion, please, to approve the staff recommendation to issue a provisional license to Alternative Therapy Groups, MPN 281300, for product manufacturing?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Let the record show Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Let the record show that the Commission unanimously approved the staff recommendation. Thank you. The next four that we're going to process are for a New England treatment access. The first is MCM 281267 for Tier 6 cultivation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you indicated, the entity is New England Treatment Access. The proposed address is 5 Forge Parkway in Franklin. The license type before you for consideration is a Tier 6 cultivation, which is an indoor operation of 40,001 to 50,000 square feet. This applicant has also applied for 4 additional licenses from the Commission, product manufacturing, 2 retail, and then finally a research license. The list of required individuals and their business roles is before you. I'm going to endeavor not to read each of them each and every time. It is a sizable list, but of course this summary will be available on our website. I also don't want to badger anyone's name. Next, there are a number of entities associated with the establishment that have some either direct or indirect control. They include CBPB Holdings, Reed Management Services, Eddie Out LLC, Double Creek Enterprises LLC, HCK Enterprises, Aegis USA, and Aegis MA LLC. Credit and paid internship program for students to receive training in marijuana business management. The goal of the program is to assist in the cost of a college education while providing students with the skills to enter the industry. And for non-students, the applicant plans to utilize Roxbury Community College as a recruitment resource in an effort to reach qualified community members for employment opportunities. There were no concerns that were raised during the background check on individuals or entities. And there were no disclosures that have presented suitability issues for past or certain criminal actions, no disclosures of any occupational license issues. I'm sorry, there were disclosures, however, none of them presented suitability issues. And finally, there are several interests in other jurisdictions, including the entities that I've indicated, Aegis, Fareed, HFK, have an interest in a Delaware limited liability company, but there have been no issues from this disclosure. They've obtained their certificate of good standing from both the Secretary of the Commonwealth as well as the Department of Revenue. Their proposed timeline to become operational is within 2 weeks from being issued a provisional license. The applicant will seek approval from the EPH to transfer any excess product from their medical operations to their adult use operation. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Sunday, 6 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. And they submitted the following summaries for plans, policies, and procedures: a security plan, prevention and diversion plan, storage of marijuana plan, transportation plan, inventory procedures, quality control and testing procedures, personnel procedures, dispensing procedures, record-keeping procedures, maintenance of financial records policy, and a diversity plan. They were fully compliant with submitting all the summaries, and all the summaries have been deemed to be substantially compliant with our regulations. Full compliance will be reviewed during our inspections and will be required before a final license is issued. The diversity plan includes the following: goals and objectives, which is implementing diversity programs that will include maintaining an open dialogue regarding inclusion, training events designed to bring awareness about diversity, and setting goals and tracking progress on diversity initiatives. Recruiting a diverse workforce, conducting career fairs and training for individuals, including those in areas of disproportionate impact. Their summary of their cultivation plan is the following. Their cultivation plan and the methods used in the following stages: clone and vegetative stage, flowering stage, quality control, handling and sanitary procedures, and environmental services. Again, this is a cultivation license, so there's no products to be produced and no plan to obtain marijuana or marijuana products. The Commission staff recommend issuing the provisional license with the following conditions. Final license is subject to the required individuals successfully completing a fingerprint-based check of state and national criminal history databases. Final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with the EPH regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with the requirements listed in our regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that its facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. The applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to Commission investigators, agents, and employees upon request. And finally, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee pursuant to regulations. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth, its suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. We certify that a due diligence review of the application has been performed, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and its suitability for licensure. And accordingly, we therefore recommend a provisional license with previously mentioned conditions.
Any comments or questions? Commissioner Tom?
With regard to the disclosures that were made, how was it determined that they did not present suitability issues?
In the context of any disclosures that are made, it's first evaluated against any of the exclusion provisions in the Commission's regulations. So if there were a civil disclosure, for instance, that would not rise to the level of being a criminal act that would render either a presumptive negative or a mandatory negative, then we know it, we confirm it through our background check, but it's not identified as being a suitability-related incident or disclosure.
Other questions or comments?
Could I ask for a motion, please, to accept the staff recommendation to approve a provisional license for New England Treatment Access MCM 281267 Tier 6 cultivation?
So moved.
Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Let the record, that is you, let the record show Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Title. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved the staff recommendation on MCM 281267. Thank you. Next, again, New England Treatment Access MRN 281240 retailer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a retail license proposed for New England Treatment Access. The address is 118 Collins Street in Northampton. Again, it's a retail application. They New England Treatment Access has 4 other applications pending before the Commission: cultivation, retail, research, and product manufacturing. The individuals listed on this application are the same as previously, same with the entities, with the various control over indirect or direct over the entity. They are an R&D priority applicant, and they are in compliance with DPH. They will intend to be co-located with their medical business in Northampton, or the R&D in Northampton, and they've obtained their final certificate of registration at this location for dispensing. A host community agreement was executed on March 29th, and certification has been provided. The community outreach meeting was held on March 21st. Notice was published at least 7 days prior in the Daily Hampshire Gazette. The applicant certified that notice was sent to the municipality as well as any abutters, and that they certified their compliance with the various meeting requirements. No objections were raised relative to the application. We did receive a response from the municipality on July 11th, stating that the applicant is in compliance with all local ordinances and bylaws. A summary of their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact was the same as previously indicated, that the applicant plans to partner with Roxbury Community College to develop a 4-credit and paid internship program for students to receive training in marijuana business management. For non-students, the applicant plans to utilize Roxbury Community College as a recruitment resource in an effort to reach qualified community members for employment opportunities. There were no concerns that were raised during the background check on individuals associated with the application, and no concerns raised regarding entities associated with the application. As far as any past civil or criminal actions, there were disclosures, however none presented suitability questions relative to, again, past civil or occupational license issues. There were disclosed other business interests in other jurisdictions, as indicated previously for Aegis, Breed, HFK, have interest in Delaware Limited Liability Company. There were no issues that were raised during this disclosure, in the course of this disclosure. They secured certificate of good standing from the Secretary of the Commonwealth as well as the Department of Revenue. The proposed timeline to become operational: within 2 weeks from being issued a provisional license, they will seek approval from DPH to transfer any excess product from the medical operation to the adult use operation. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. They submitted the summaries of following plans, policies, and procedures: a security plan, prevention and diversion plan, storage of marijuana plan, transportation plan, inventory procedures, quality control and testing procedures, personnel procedures, dispensing procedures, record-keeping procedures, maintenance of financial records policy, and a diversity plan. They were compliant with submitting all of the summaries, and those summaries have been deemed to be substantially compliant with our regulations. Full compliance will be reviewed during our inspection process and will be required before a final license is issued. The diversity plan was the same as previously indicated, implementing diversity programs that will include maintaining open dialogue regarding inclusion, training events designed to bring awareness about diversity, and setting goals and tracking progress on diversity initiatives, recruiting a diverse workforce, and conducting career fairs and trainings for individuals, including those in areas of disproportionate impact. This is a retail license, so there's no cultivation plan and no production plan, to address the last question from Mr. Chairman. That said, because it's a retail license, they have established cultivation and processing R&D operations. The applicant's long-term plan is to be self-sufficient cultivation through retail operation. Their initial goal is for its marijuana supply is to apply and receive DPH approval to transfer excess medical marijuana supply to their adult use operation. The Commission staff recommends issuing a provisional license with the following conditions. The final license is subject to the required individual successfully completing a fingerprint-based check of state and national criminal history databases. The final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with DPH regulations. The final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with the requirements listed in our regulations. The final license is subject to the inspection and audit to ascertain that its facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. The applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to Commission investigators, agents, and employees upon request. And finally, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of appropriate license fee pursuant to our regulations. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth, its suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. We certify that the due diligence review of the application has been performed, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and its suitability for licensure. Accordingly, we therefore recommend a provisional license with the following, or with the previously mentioned conditions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Dunham?
This is MRN 281240.
Yes.
They're located in Northampton,
That's correct.
and their positive impact plan is to partner with Roxbury Community College.
That's correct.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Commissioner.
I don't think this requires a vote, but given that so many applications are coming in before the positive impact guidance was issued, can we agree as a policy that upon renewal, all of these applicants will follow up on their plans?
It's certainly something we can build into our renewal process, absolutely. And similarly, related, not specific to this application, but related, is that if we were to reopen an application and request additional information, say for instance related to the positive impact plan, we would circulate that guidance to that applicant as guidance for them. So in other words, we're seeking more information, here's guidance that the commission has put forward.
That makes perfect sense.
Any other questions or comments? So can I have a motion to approve the staff recommendation to issue a provisional license to New England Treatment Access MRN 281240 retailer?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
With the Chair, Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner McBride. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved the staff recommendation. The next one is New England Treatment Access MRN 281287 retailer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you indicated, this is a retail license proposed for New England Treatment Access. The location of the establishment is 160 Washington Street, Brookline. Again, this applicant has submitted 4 additional applications to the Commission: cultivation, retail, research, and product manufacturing. The individuals identified are the same as previously referenced, as the same with the entities in their role as either indirect or direct, with either indirect or direct control. They have secured their R&D priority status, and they're in compliance with DPH. This is a proposed co-location facility in the town of Brookline. They have secured their final certificate of registration at this location for dispensing. The host community agreement was executed on April 24th, and certification has been provided. The community outreach meeting was held on April 12th, with notice published at least 7 days prior in the Brookline tab. The applicant certified that notice was sent to the municipalities and abutters, and they further certified that they're compliant with the Commission's meeting requirements. There were no objections communicated to the Commission, and a response was received from the municipality on July 18th, stating that the applicant is in compliance with all local ordinances and bylaws. Their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact is the same, which is to partner with Roxbury Community College to develop a 4-credit and paid internship program for students to receive training in marijuana business management. For non-students, the applicant plans to utilize Roxbury Community College as a recruitment resource in an effort to reach qualified community members for employment opportunities. There were no concerns raised during the background check on individuals or entities. There were disclosures for the applicant's past civil or criminal actions, as well as for occupational license issues. Those disclosures presented no suitability issues. Similarly, there were disclosures of business interests in other jurisdictions from Aegis, Reed, HFK, as they have interest in a Delaware limited liability company. No issues arise from this disclosure. They've secured their certificate of good standing from the Secretary of the Commonwealth as well as the Department of Revenue. As far as their management and operations review, their timeline to become operational is within 2 weeks of being issued a provisional license. The applicant will seek approval from DPH to transfer excess product from the medical operation to their adult use operation. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6:45 p.m., and Sunday, 12 p.m. to 4:45 p.m. They submitted summaries of the following plans, policies, and procedures: security plan, prevention of diversion plan, storage of marijuana plan, transportation plan, inventory procedures, quality control and testing procedures, personnel procedures, dispensing procedures, record-keeping procedures, maintenance of financial records policy, and diversity plan. The applicant is fully compliant with submitting these summaries, and those summaries have been deemed to be substantially compliant with the requirements listed in our regulations. Full compliance will be reviewed during inspections and will be required before a final license is issued. The diversity plan is the same as previously indicated, which is to implement diversity programs that will include maintaining an open dialogue regarding inclusion, training events designed to bring awareness about diversity, and setting goals and tracking progress on diversity initiatives. recruiting a diverse workforce, and conducting career fairs and trainings for individuals, including those in areas of disproportionate impact. This is a retail license, so there's no cultivation plan or products being manufactured. As far as their plan for obtaining marijuana or marijuana products, the applicant has established cultivation and processing R&D operations. The long-term plan is to be a self-sufficient cultivation through retail operation. Their goal is for its marijuana supply to be to apply and receive DPH approval for transfer of any excess medical marijuana supply to the adult use operation. Commission staff recommends issuing a provisional license with the following conditions. Final license is subject to the required individual successfully completing a fingerprint-based check of state and national criminal history databases. Final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with DPH regulations. Final license is subject to an inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with the requirements listed in our regulations. Final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that the facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. The applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to commission investigators, agents, and employees upon request. And finally, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of appropriate license fee pursuant to our regulations. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. Commission staff certify that a due diligence review of the application has been performed, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and its suitability for licensure. Accordingly, we therefore recommend provisional license with the previously mentioned conditions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the commission? May I ask for a motion, please, to approve the staff recommendation to approve a provisional license to New England Treatment Access MRN 281-287 for retailing?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Let the record show Commissioner McBride made a motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show the commission unanimously approved the staff recommendation on MRN 281-287. Thank you. The last one for review today and consideration is New England Treatment Access MPN 281306, product manufacturer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you've indicated, this is a product manufacturing license for New England Treatment Access located at 5 Forge Parkway in Franklin. This applicant has also applied for 4 additional licenses to the Commission: cultivation, 2 retail, and 1 research. The owners or managers or individuals tied to the business are the same. Similarly, any entities with direct or indirect control are also the same. They are a priority applicant. As an existing R&D, that R&D is in compliance with DPH. They intend to be co-located with their R&D in Franklin. The R&D has obtained their final certificate of registration at this location for cultivation and processing. A host community agreement was executed on April 13th and certification was provided. The community outreach meeting was held on March 27th with notice published at least 7 days prior in the Milford Daily News. The applicant has certified that notice was sent to both the municipalities as well as any abutters, and they've also certified that the meeting was held in compliance with our requirements. There were no objections communicated to the Commission. We received a response from the municipality on July 11th stating that the applicant is in compliance with all local ordinances and bylaws. Their plan to positively impact areas of disproportionate impact is the same as previously indicated, with plans to partner with Roxbury Community College to develop a 4-credit and paid internship for students to receive training in marijuana business management. For non-students, the applicant plans to utilize Roxbury Community College as a recruitment resource in an effort to reach qualified community members for employment opportunities. There were no concerns raised during the background check on individuals or entities associated with the application. There were disclosures relative to past civil or criminal actions that were occupational license issues. However, those disclosures did not present suitability issues. Similarly, there were disclosures of business interests in other jurisdictions for Aegis, Reed, HFK, as they have interest in the Delaware Limited Liability Company. No issues rise from that disclosure. They have secured their certificate of good standing with the Secretary of the Commonwealth as well as the Department of Revenue. The proposed timeline to become operational in the adult use market lies within 2 weeks of being issued a provisional license. The applicant will seek approval from DPH to transfer any excess product from their medical operation to their adult use operation. Their hours of operation are proposed from Monday through Sunday, 6 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. They submitted the following summaries of plans, policies, and procedures: security plan, prevention and diversion plan, storage of marijuana plan, transportation plan, inventory procedures, quality control and testing procedures, personnel procedures, dispensing procedures, record keeping procedures, maintenance of financial records policy and diversity plan. These summaries, they are fully compliant in submitting these summaries, and those summaries have been deemed to be substantially compliant with our regulations. Full compliance will be reviewed during our inspections and will be required before a final license is issued. The diversity plan is the same as previously indicated, which is implementing diversity programs that will include maintaining an open dialogue regarding inclusion, training events designed to bring awareness about diversity, setting goals, and tracking progress on diversity initiatives, recruiting a diverse workforce, and conducting career fairs and trainings for individuals, including those in areas of disproportionate impact. This is a production license, so there's no cultivation plan. However, the summary of the products to be produced or sold includes the following: flour concentrate mix, vaporizer cartridges, chocolate bars, chocolate caramels, lozenges, gummies, chocolate covered morsels, baked goods, lotion, salve, capsules, tinctures, and cooking oil. As similarly, because there is not a retail, there is no plan for obtaining final marijuana products. The Commission staff recommends issuing a provisional license with the following conditions. The final license is subject to the required individuals successfully completing a fingerprint-based check of state and national criminal history databases. The final license is subject to certification that the applicant remains in compliance with DPH regulations. The final license is subject to an inspection and audit to ascertain compliance with the requirements of our regulations. The final license is subject to inspection and audit to ascertain that their facilities are compliant with all applicable state and local codes, bylaws, ordinances, and regulations. The applicant shall cooperate with and provide information to Commission investigators, agents, and employees upon request. And finally, that the provisional license is subject to the payment of the appropriate license fee pursuant to our regulations. This recommendation is based on the applicant's demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth, suitability for licensure, and upon the evaluation of the thoroughness of the applicant's responses to the required criteria. Commission staff certify that a due diligence review of the application has been performed, and as of this date, the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and its suitability for licensure. And accordingly, we therefore recommend that this applicant be granted a provisional license with the previously mentioned conditions.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments for the Executive Director? Then can I ask for a motion to accept and approve the staff recommendation to issue a provisional license to New England Treatment Access MPN 281-306 for product manufacturing? Can I have a second, please? With regard to Commissioner Doyle made a motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner McBride. All in favor?
Aye.
The Commission unanimously accepted the recommendation of the staff to issue a provisional license MPN 281-306. Mr. Executive Director, is there anything else at this point in time?
There are no further applications for me to read before you today. So what I do want to indicate, though, is that moving forward, I'm confident that a condition can be removed from future consideration, which is the fingerprint-based background check. That process is operational and functional, and any applications that come before the Commission in the future will have conducted their fingerprint background check. So I'm confident that that, as a condition, can be removed from future consideration. However, we will, of course, maintain that condition on any applicant that has been approved already. I also want to just reiterate that each of these applications was reviewed individually, as there were 2 entities, but there were a total of 7 applications that needed to be reviewed. All the materials were confirmed as having been submitted and evaluated on their own individually. So it was not as if it was 2 reviews, it was in fact 7.
I appreciate that. I'm sure we all do. And you kind of were setting me up perfectly, because I wanted to thank the staff, and particularly Kyle, for the amount of work that I know has gone into these 7 applications. And lest you rest on your laurels, as you well know, we expect to have increasing volume every 2 weeks. So thank you for your work thus far, and more importantly, thank you for your work going forward. But no, I really do appreciate it. I'm sure the rest of the Commission as well really appreciates what goes into this in terms of not just time, but diligence and taking the responsibility incredibly seriously. So thank you for that. Okay, our next meeting is 2 weeks from today, Thursday, August 9th at 1 p.m. It will be back at the Gaming Commission, so let me take this opportunity to thank our hosts at the Health Policy Commission, and we might be back here again, but certainly we've appreciated the opportunity to have our meetings here when the Gaming Commission was otherwise occupied. May I ask for a motion to adjourn, given that there's no further business in front of the Commission?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
That was the quickest.
You're
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at